So I'm really thrilled this morning to be with Leo Hohmann. He's a veteran journalist and a news editor for online news giant WND. He has a particular focus on immigration and Islam. Prior to joining WND, he worked for more than 2 decades as a newspaper reporter and editor. And we're thrilled to have you here. You're no stranger to our friends here in Minnesota. You've been here on speaking events numerous times, and it's just great. For me, it's a privilege to meet with you this morning. What's on your mind this morning, the day after the verdict comes in for guilty for the Chauvin trial? Or is there anything else you'd like to talk about? It's really up to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on your podcast, Wes. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning and speaking to wonderful people in Minnesota. Yeah, it's the day after the verdict, so it seems like that's what's on everybody's mind. The verdict of guilty on all three counts came swiftly, and I wish I could say that it was swift justice that was administered, but I'm not so sure. Um, the judge astonishingly did not sequester this jury, and they came. What was it? About 4 hours yesterday when they came back with the announced that they had reached a verdict, and then it actually was announced a while after that. But I don't feel like we talked a little bit about this off air, but I don't feel like this jury had much of a choice, which is never a good sign if in the in the realm of the legal field and getting true blind justice. That's what the goal is, and I think we always expect that in America is to have a legal system that administers justice blindly, meaning there's no bias. There's it just looks at the facts and makes the decision. But these people were under such extreme pressure. Think about it. I mean, having the weight of the world on your shoulders, where if you should come down with anything but a guilty verdict on all three counts, the maximum guilty verdict, you're going to single-handedly start bloodshed across America, not just in Minneapolis, not just in Minnesota. These thugs had their rioting gear and their troops in line in major cities across the nation. They were bussing them in. They were, in many cases, paid rioters, and we can guess who was, signing the checks.
Mm-hmm.
And they were ready to go. And from what I understand, there was a good deal of rioting, even though they came down with the desired outcome. And now we hear that they were celebrating the outcome with what?
Yeah.
Rioting, of course.
Of course, and there's these beautiful videos of them throwing out cash at the George Kirby shrine, throwing out bundles of cash into the crowd in a celebratory manner. They came down with the maximum judgment because Maxine Waters, Congresswoman, was in town,
Yes.
virtually inciting insurrection, inciting a riot with
She said that
statements
we need to
regarding.
she urged her people to get, quote, more confrontational, right? And
Right.
how does that compare to what Trump said on January 6th? I don't recall Trump saying anything even half that provocative or insightful. He said, go peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol. He said that, our movement is not a movement of violence. But this woman went out of her way to incite violence, and there was a move by Republicans to censure her, and of course that was automatically shot down by the Democrats in the Congress, led by Nancy Pelosi. The woman is just she's off the rails. She's always been off the rails, but now it seems like she and these others like Maxine Waters, they're not government representatives. These are revolutionary activists posing as politicians. What is their end goal in Minnesota? What is their end goal in America? They've already defunded the police in Minneapolis. What is the next big thing that they're pushing for, in your opinion, Wes?
Well, they defunded the police, as you say, to such an extent that our local police force had to dispatch something like 16 officers to Minneapolis to help with the threatened coup insurrection that was going to take place in the Twin Cities. So I think of that as a good real life instruction for the local police forces here in Rochester to have that experience of being able to look at the crowd and identify BLM, Antifa, the Black Power movements such as Nation of Islam and Louis Farrakhan's boys, along with I know I'm leaving some out, but the Council on American Islamic Relations. This video is going to get a strike now for sure. But the people who had these professionally produced flags and signs, well, the next thing now is to push back locally even harder against these individuals. We're using words, everybody. We're speaking metaphorically when we say push back, okay? We're using words. We got to make that clear to the left-hand side.
Right. The left can use all, they don't even have to use metaphors. They can come right out and say, get out on the streets and be more confrontational. And that word more, I think, was the key, right? Because they're already burning things down. So if you say they're already attacking people, attacking white people and confronting them, randomly on the streets as they drive by. So if you're saying that's not enough, you need to do more. What are you asking for? You're asking for murder.
They're running up behind people. They're in broad daylight, a group of 10 guys stealing some white man's shoes, beating him, people getting beat up on the transit system. An elderly white woman in Minneapolis minding her business at a bus stop was guilty of being white. Turns out, I believe that victim was Puerto Rican, just a little bit of a lighter skinned Puerto Rican, but they assumed, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember all the situations that have occurred, but over the last week, there have been as many as 100 arrests per evening in Minneapolis, St. Paul. 100 arrests per night indicate that something's going on up there, but inside the Rochester media bubble, it's only 90 minutes away, 60 minutes if you drive fast. It's the Rochester's inside this media bubble, this cocoon, this warm blanket of sunshine and roses, and we are seemingly unaware of what's happening. Our governmental forces are aware of what's happening, but they don't want the local people to make the connections between, say, the Black Panther Party in Minnesota and all these others that are congealing around certain issues. Anyway, I'm
So do you see Minneapolis, St. Paul area becoming like another Portland, where they just have continuous on and off rioting and intimidation and attacks on people based on their skin color?
Well, it seems to be that even some politicians and elected officials will send dog whistles about what's permissible activity, that, we're always told that it's a marginalized community that's under attack that needs to be protected and have a special status for their protection, that there's a minority group that's being vilified. They tried doing that with Asians recently. It's interesting. I have a contact in the Vietnamese community. And by the way, my connection with the Vietnamese community goes way back to the 70s, when my family first helped groups of what we called boat people, not disparagingly. Okay, let me just make that clear. That wasn't a disparaging. That was a slogan or phrase we used to welcome these people, to say they were trying to get away from communism so badly, and the Cambodians and the people who fled the Pol Pot regime that murdered millions. These people were trying so hard to get to the United States. They worked hard. They had 3-generation, 4-generation households. They saved money. They bought homes, the 2nd generation. We saw some of the people we worked with go on to university to become nurses. One of the older guys in the family became an automobile mechanic. So I have a contact in the Vietnamese community in the Twin Cities who tells me they're always under attack by a certain privileged group of people, right? There's a certain group of people that's attacking them, and it's not white people, okay? It's just not.
Well, if you look at these Asian attacks in New York City, it's the same thing. It's not white people.
Yeah, it's seriously not. a white on Asian crime problem, and the statistics are well publicized, but don't let facts interrupt
Never.
politicians' feelings. They're going to do their dog whistles against. It's always white supremacy. It comes down to blaming white people for absolutely everything.
Yes,
So,
Wes, that is the MO. You're exactly right. And why is that? Why is that? We need to teach people why it is. This is critical race theory in practice. These are, as the co-founder of Black Lives Matter said, we are trained Marxists. So they're doing nothing but what they were trained to do. And they were trained to divide people up by race, gender, sexual orientation, pit them against each other, and create, I think they want to create in America a race war. I really do. Um, and then they can come in and really bust some heads once they get the two sides at war with each other. Then they can use the governmental apparatus, which we know now that Homeland Security and FBI, the whole shebang in the government is captured by the left. They are Barack Obama sycophants in the FBI, where they've proven themselves, because you look at who they go after, and then you look at who they don't go after. Okay, and so we know the type of people who are running the FBI. So if they work hard enough, I think they feel, and if they work hard enough in practicing their critical race theory, which is nothing more than an offshoot of critical legal theory, which was an offshoot of critical theory that came out of the Frankfurt School in Germany from the early 1920s, from a bunch of disaffected Marxists over there who were disappointed that the German middle class didn't rise up and bring in a proletarian revolution like they did in Russia. So they get chased out of Germany by the Nazis, and they set up shop here in New York City at Columbia University.
yep.
And we've had 100 years now of these cultural Marxists who came out of the Frankfurt School. We've had 100 years of them indoctrinating teachers, the media, students, college professors, you name it. It's even in the corporate boardrooms now. It's amazing what they've been able to accomplish in just 100 years. And they're ready to roll. They're ready to roll. It's game on for these people, Wes. The only problem is we on the other side they've had 100 years, okay? We've had, it seems like maybe 100 days that we started to wake up over the last 100 days as to what might be happening.
Right. They've had Hollywood.
So we wonder why we're always on the defensive.
The Frankfurt School, a lot of them were deposited in California.
Yes.
And how do you not be happy in California? But there they were. They landed over there. They're fleeing Nazi Germany. They're fleeing National Socialism. They run to the United States, and then they take over the media, and they start producing movies that will, massage out certain messages and feelings into the population at large. And they were really successful. And they wrote some great scripts, too, some real tearjerkers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to name specific titles because it'll give away maybe too much about my politics in terms of how I'm watching Hollywood. Mm-hmm. I would have to think carefully about that, because a lot of those films I really love. They're real tearjerkers, but they were meant to exploit our better angels. Those films were meant to, they're derivative of our values and our ethics and our traditions, and they try to bend that in a certain angle toward an agenda, which is a critical race theory, as you mentioned, which of course you might talk about anarcho-syndicalism, or the roots of that, how it led to Michel Foucault's work, and the influence that's had on education and government and prison systems. And it's just crazy. They're in every aspect of our society, including, of course, the seminaries and then the churches.
Yes. I'm sure you've probably heard of a woman named Bella Dodd.
Yeah. See, I've been wanting to look into Talk about her a little bit, because her name keeps coming up. She blew the whistle in the 50s, right? And then she wrote a book.
She did. She testified before Congress about the infiltration of the communists into, as you said, all of the major institutions of this country. And she herself, she was one of them. She was a member of the Communist Party USA, and she was a Marxist-Leninist and a sort of marginal Catholic. She grew up a Catholic, but her religion became Marxist-Leninism. And she became, as she got more into it, and she actually rose up the ranks pretty high, she became disillusioned because she didn't see the Marxist movement really helping the poor people. And that was what drove her to the movement to begin with. She was sort of a do-gooder Catholic who wanted to help the poor in America. You know, you can understand that. A lot of people get drawn into it from that angle. But the more
When I
she
used to
got
volunteer
into
in a soup kitchen, I
yeah,
used to feel really good about
right,
serving meals to homeless
sure,
people, and I that sort of ethos of doing for others result. I mean, you never feel so good as when you're helping other people, and it's true of
yeah,
conservatives as well as liberals. But I'm afraid when those cultural Marxists have control of children's worlds at the lowest age groups into the high school groups, and then they keep pumping them with messages of how to feel good. It turns altruism into kind of a pathology, and pathological altruism is ultimately self-destructive,
yes.
and nobody really trusts it as a motive for anything. You have to be into your own self-interest to a degree. But back to your comments
Yeah.
about Bella Dodd.
Well, yeah, I
Good,
think
her good
the one big takeaway from Bella Dodd's testimony, and there was a lot of it, but the one thing that I will never forget that just immediately comes to mind that she said was that during the 1930s, which was the period where she was very active, I think from roughly 1935 to 45, in that period, she said that she put 1,100 communists into the priesthood. She recruited them. She and her comrades recruited 1,100 communists into the priesthood in the United States alone. And so the idea was that they would rise up the ranks and become bishops and monsignors, and eventually, these people would become cardinals. And we see that in the Catholic Church today, where the majority of bishops in the United States and the world are pushing critical race theory. They're pushing climate change. They're pushing Gaia worship, for heaven's sakes,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it's crazy. It's crazy. But God bless Bella Dodd. She blew the whistle on this. She's one of my favorite all-time whistleblowers. She did write a book. The name of it escapes me at the moment. But you can read it for free online, I believe, in a PDF. And
We
so
can include the link to that.
I encourage people to look her up and read that book.
We can include the link to that book online. The title of her book is School of Darkness.
Yes.
School of Darkness. And was this all prior to Vatican II or after Vatican II? Because the current occupant of the chair of St. Peter is one of these old school liberation theology types of the Enrique Dussel sort from South America and also Central America, which led to some of the real extreme revolutionary movements that occurred. For example, in Nicaragua, where I actually took photographs. I have an interesting collection of photographs of the cathedral in Managua, Nicaragua, at the height of the Sandinista regime's rule in Nicaragua.
Oh, yeah, Daniel Ortega. Yeah,
Daniel Ortega, they merge Christian symbolism, and they
yes,
have all of the revolutionary heroes up on the dais, and it takes the place of Saint Michael and the archangels and Mary and Jesus, and Che Guevara is at the front of the cathedral. It's actually, I need to probably
That is it. That is
I have some
interesting.
very rare photographs that are really, they're my property, and I can share those now. So I'll probably go back and dig those up. But sir, was this prior to
It's blasphemy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's blasphemy. It's straight up blasphemy. I mean, even if you couldn't get away with that in Islam, let's just say.
No, 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 no.
But was that prior to Vatican II or after Vatican II? Do you think the infiltration might have caused the watering down of the sacrament?
100%. This was the period Bella Dodd was active in the Communist Party in America was the 1930s and 40s. Vatican II was 1962 to 1965. That conference was held. And this was a global thing. It wasn't just happening, obviously, in America. So they were doing this. The cultural Marxists were doing this all over the Western world, and that influence was very, very strong at the Vatican II conference. Not only among some of the bishops, but a lot of the theologians who attended that conference influenced the bishops, and they got this idea that God is blessing as Pope Francis would call it, God wills a plurality of religions. In other words, Christianity or Catholicism is not the only way to approach God, that we can approach him through all these different religions: Islam, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Hinduism, Native Americanism. It's all the same. It's all leading to the same God. There's no uniqueness about Christianity and that faith. And this was very heavily influenced in the Vatican II. And they came out with a document in 1965 at the end of the conference called Nostra Aetate, which in that document, I encourage people to read that document.
Yeah, we need to
you
include
can
the link
still
to
find
that.
it online and at the Vatican Documents Archive. Yes, and
Yeah.
there are some real blockbuster anti-Christian statements within that document. It was supposed to sort of heal the wounds with Judaism, which is not a bad thing. Christianity and Judaism, have been at each other's throats for decades, hundreds of years. And so they wanted to heal those wounds, but then they turn also to Islam in this document, and they start saying, that Allah is, there's really they try to equivocate Allah and Islam's view also of the Virgin Mary with Catholicism. Then there's sort of a blurring of the line there, and that was the very beginning of what we see today, with an even much stronger blurring of the lines.
It's sort of like trying to take a Jane Austen novel like Pride and Prejudice and then shuffle that deck of cards with Bram Stoker's Dracula and try to put those two novels together. Even if you don't believe in the afterlife, there's no merging of those two literary approaches, right? I mean, I'm just saying, but I'm not going to get into an argument about afterlife, but because I don't personally have any direct experiential evidence of that, except for the miracles that occur in my own life and what I see happening around me with other people. But I have my own reasons for the proofs for the existence of God, which may not make any sense to other people. But I found Nostra Aetate. Will include a link to that in the description below the video as well. My Latin was good enough that I could find that right away. And Leo, have you ever been to the Church of St. John the Divine in Manhattan, near Columbia, just south of Columbia University, about 110th Street? There's a church where it's been taken over by idolatry, and it's architecturally a very interesting church, but it has a section for as you said, this plethora of approaches to the divine. It's just bizarre to walk in there. In case people were thinking that our discussion was impractical and somehow ancient history, going back to all of these origins and roots of the takeover of our churches, bringing it back to modern day Rochester, Minnesota, where we have churches celebrating Ramadan, and they put a poster, a feel
Yes.
good, blessed Ramadan. They don't know the origins and the meaning of Ramadan is the massacre of hundreds of Jews and Christians who welcomed Muhammad and his followers into Medina as refugees. And then a couple years later, he decided he wasn't satisfied with that status, and everyone ends up getting dispatched to the afterlife. So, but there's also other data points where these leftist groups are able to use the churches, the church basements, even the coffee
Yes.
pot, for their radical political activities. And there's some churches where they've had hundreds of people gather, and then they pass out legislators' data, and they direct people to take out their cell phones and send a text message to their office, or save the number, or they include all their contact info. But we're catching up with them in that approach as well. But we certainly don't have these nationally connected groups like they do, where they're calling for driver's licenses for all. They're calling for voting rights for everybody. Everybody can vote. You don't have to show any ID. There's unions that have meetings in the churches. And anyway, that's a modern day reality based on that infiltration of the churches, where even at the pastoral level now, it's kind of anything goes in terms of leftist politics and groups being welcomed
Well,
into.
and now you've also seen Pope Francis, the leader of the Catholic Church, and Franklin Graham and Pat Robertson, two leaders of the Evangelical Church, uh, coming out in support of the vaccine, Bill Gates vaccine. Now if you want to get the vaccine, if you want to get the vaccine, that's up to you. I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise. But if you're gonna use your pulpit to try to get other people to get this vaccine against their conscience, then shame on you, because all you have to do is look at the people promoting this vaccine. And to me, this is just my opinion, Wes, if you have an ounce of spiritual discernment, you will see where this vaccine came from. You'll investigate the industry who is profiting from it and what's in it and the side effects and the fact that it's all new and experimental. It's never been tested beyond 2 or 3 months on human beings, so we don't know the long-term effects of it. It's very controversial. It should be controversial. And
Please mention,
you should not be using your bully pulpit to convince other people to get it.
you have a new article that you've written on this very topic, in fact, regarding the Wu flu shot, the China flu vaccine. And I'm going to include a link to that article. Could you mention the title of that article, by the way? That new one you wrote
Oh,
about
yeah, yeah. About the study, the British study.
the study about how soon the next wave of cases will be from people who were vaccinated.
Yeah, yeah. The title is British Study, Third Wave of Sickness and Death Will Be Dominated by Those Who Have Been Fully Vaccinated. This study came out March 31st in Britain. It was what was the college? It was the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. It was a peer-reviewed study by a reputable medical journal at this university, and they basically said that up to 60 to 70% of the new COVID patients in this third wave will be people who were fully vaccinated. And guess what? They're going to have the people who get COVID who've been vaccinated. Among those who will be hospitalized, I guess is what they were saying. Among those who will be hospitalized with COVID, some of the most serious cases are going to be the people who were vaccinated. Now,
Thank
is
you,
that not the opposite of what we've been told, or what?
Absolutely the opposite. We'll pick up with that in the second half of this video. That article is found at leohohmann.com. And we'll pick it up at the second part.